Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Jason Kelly. I'm the director of the IUPUI Arts and Humanities Institute and a professor of history. This is exciting. This is our fourth week in a 7-week program of quarantine conversations that happen every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. This is a collaboration between Indiana University Bloomington and IUPUI, and it is co-organized between myself and Ed Komentale, who is a professor of English and Associate Vice Provost of Arts and Humanities at IUB. The program is designed to show how the arts and humanities can provide useful perspectives and frameworks for understanding and addressing the current historical crisis that we're all living through. The talks cover everything from disease itself to the historical, cultural, social, and experimental or experiential dimensions of things like outbreaks and pandemics. In recent months, faculty from across the IU system have turned their attention to responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. These individuals include dozens of arts and humanities faculty who've transformed their teaching, their scholarship, and their community engagement to address the challenges facing the residents of Indiana and beyond. They know, like you and I know, that the arts and humanities provide us with valuable tools to respond to this historic moment. They provide us context and interpretive frameworks to better understand the social, cultural, and political significance of this moment. They offer us ways to think about our own lives. They offer us much needed critical techniques that have the capacity to affect policy and transform our communities. Art and design are particularly important in this effort to reflect upon and reshape our worlds. Tonight, I want to give a special thank you to the alumni who are watching tonight, especially those alumni from IUB's College of Arts and Sciences and IUPUI's School of Liberal Arts. We greatly appreciate your continued support for the faculty, students, and staff at our institutions. And thanks to our friends at the Arts and Humanities Council in Bloomington and Indiana Humanities, and especially Leonamias, I encourage you to visit their websites and follow them on social media to learn about all the great work that Indiana Humanities is doing throughout the state. Just a few things to keep in mind are some other events that are online regularly, such as Food for Thought, which is a new webinar series from the College of Arts and Sciences, the IUPUI Arts and Humanities Art and Ethics seminars, two of which are coming up later this month. And you can find more information about those at the IUB's College of Arts and Sciences website and the IUPUI Arts and Humanities website. I also want to thank some of the folks who have made these events possible. Without them, we would just be in a bit of a situation. And these are Joe Hilland, Gerard Panakuk, and Ethan Gill. They are the folks who get our tech taken care of, set us up, and make sure that this is available the next day for folks to stream who can't make it. Tonight, we're discussing the topic of mobilizing creativity and the arts in time of crisis. And we all know how important the arts have become in our lives over the last weeks and months that we've been home and living through this current pandemic. Tonight, we have 5 speakers. Each presenter has been asked to begin with talking about a significant object, and this could be a poem, a painting, even an egg carton, an object of some sort, and expand from there. And this object-based approach is a hook to get us thinking about some of the bigger ideas that we're going to be talking about this evening. We'll be taking questions at the end, so I encourage all of you on Facebook Live to submit your questions and comments in the feed. They will be sent to us, and we will make sure to discuss as many of them as possible. Our first presenter this evening is Christin Cato. Christin is a New York City-based performer and writer, and she's currently pursuing an MFA in playwriting at IUB, where she was just awarded the Jason W. Stradman Award for Playwriting. So today, Christin Cato will be speaking or presenting microplays about the daily experience of COVID-19. And this is very exciting because this is the first time that this series has done online plays. So join me in welcoming Christin. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. It's an honor to be here with you guys. Thank you for having me. I am the new third-year MFA playwright, and we are entering some very interesting times. The object that I have is this play. It's just a play. It's a book that has pages and text. And the reason why I present this object is because what do plays look like during this time of quarantine, self-isolation, and all the things. So I guess this is a great segue into theater and to my background in theater. I've been professionally working in the theater industry for 10 years now, as an actor, producer, playwright, director, stage manager, assistant stage manager, administrator, usher, box office handle. I mean, the list goes on, because when you work in the theater, you have to wear many hats. And 2020 obviously has been a very interesting year for the theater community because of COVID-19, mandatory quarantine, self-isolation, and social distancing. The theater community has been forced to cancel almost all or most of their programming. And this includes theater seasons, festivals, residencies, workshops, and productions. And as you can imagine, this has financially impacted many institutions and organizations. And it's had even a harder impact on employees and artists. And also, Broadway is closed, guys. Broadway, until further notice. So, you know, considering all these things, the future of theater seems to be bleak. And especially when you consider that there will be no live theater all summer and possibly in the fall. There will most likely be no live theater until we find a vaccine. And some institutions are starting to predict that there won't be live theater until February 2021. However, if we contemplate on the strengths of the theater community, we will find that we are creatively inclined to find solutions. We are resilient, we are smart, we will always make art, we will persist. And considering all the things that we have endured throughout the world's history, theater has never died. Therefore, COVID-19 is not the death of theater. Instead, we will evolve. And what does this evolution look like, you might ask? So over the past few years, theaters all across the country have been recording their productions, mainly for archival purposes. But this has proved to be a lucrative thing, especially during these times. Many productions that have been canceled or postponed and that have had recorded previews and then they stream them online. So theaters have been able to sell tickets online and stream these shows. A great example is a friend and colleague of mine, Rendara Santiago. She had a play, the Siblings play, and it was only produced about a week at Rattlestick. And luckily, Rattlestick recorded one of their live performances, and they were able to stream it online and finish their run. And they were able to charge for tickets and all these things. So for theaters that have had to cancel their seasons and lost a lot of money, some have been able to dig into their archives and stream their past productions online. So not only has this been a great way to make back some revenue, it has also made theater more accessible. And it goes without saying that, you know, theater is not the same unless it is experienced live. And that's where the magic of theater lives, in these live performances. And one of the factors that often limit the scope of theater has been the inaccessibility of it. Some people, you know, don't have the luxury of seeing live theater, and so streaming it online for a zero to low cost has made theater not only accessible to everyone nationally, but also internationally. So what does the future of theater look like right now? And it looks like this. It looks like Facebook Live. It looks like Zoom readings, conferences, YouTube, and Vimeo streaming. And so tonight, I will present two microplays. And microplays, this means like a very short play, like 1 page long. And so I'm presenting these two plays in the style of how theaters will probably be operating until there's a vaccine. The first, which I will play for you, is a pre-recorded monologue starring our very talented MFA recent graduate, Elise Chase. This play is called My Name is Corona, and I wrote this very early on in the beginning of March, in the beginning of this whole pandemic, and this was my initial response to COVID-19. Let me share my screen with you guys.
Today is day 1 of the CDC Disease Detention Center for Orphans, and I haven't made any friends yet. My name is Corona. It means crown in Spanish, and in Latin, and in Greek, and in all those root languages we base etymology on. I'm pretty sure my parents named me Corona because I was meant to be their little princess, to grow up and be a heroic queen. I know I am destined for something great. I don't care what these other kids say. They're just jealous. My counselor told me that the kids are competitive and they get jealous. This one girl was all like, oh, what kind of name is that anyway? Corona? And I'm like, no, I'm a crown. I'm royalty. The people will love me. And she was like, love you? Do you know where you're at, girl? An orphanage, a jail. We are injected with cells to kill people and get rid of the population. When the human gets too cocky, we gotta knock them dead. And then I was like, what kind of name is your Yersinia pestis? And she was like, oh, you must not know. I'm Black Death, bitch. And then something came over me, and I corrected her. Corona. Corona. My name is Corona. And one day I will show them. I will show them my power, how I will change the world around me, make the earth a better place to live. The animals will roam free with fresh fruit. The oceans and tides will be one with the moon. The air will be crisp and fresh, and the people will thank me. They will thank me because I will humble them and show them another way of life. Bring them back to basics, back to love, back to growth, back to one. I wish I could have met my parents. I know they didn't mean to leave me here. I will make them proud of me. I was destined for greatness.
So yes, shout out to Elise Chase. She always makes me laugh so much. So as you can see, the pre-recordings are one of the ways that the theaters are monetizing this time of quarantine. And a cool thing about these pre-recordings is that about recording these scenes is that you can add cinematic elements, which you can't do in live theater. So yes, so the next play I would like to present is called Spiritual Armor. And this is a micro play that I wrote for the Coronavirus 1 Minute Play Festival. And it was streamed online and presented by the Barefoot Theater Company in New York City. And I will read along live with our very talented BFA recent graduate, Danielle McKnight. Danielle. Hey.
Hi.
So this is what a live reading will look like online. So yeah, this is Spiritual Armor. I will play Abuela, who is around like any kind of grandmother's age.
And I will play Fifi, who is 10 years old.
Yeah. And Fifi and her grandmother, Abuela, are watching TV.
Abuela,
Dímelo, Fifi.
it looks like it's getting worse.
Hey, everything gets worse before it gets better.
They say that people my age produce an enzyme that creates immunity defense.
And they say that people my age die.
Abuela, don't say that. Don't talk like that.
You know how you love bread, pan con mantequilla?
Yes?
Well, doesn't wheat make that bread?
Sí, abuela.
Well, if the grain of wheat does not die, it won't fall to the ground and it will remain alone. But when the wheat dies, it produces many seeds which fall to the ground. Entonces, when it dies, there's abundance. Abundancia.
They embrace. A long one until the lights go out.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
Great. So yes, give it up for Danielle McKnight. So yeah, these plays are available on my new play exchange website, which I believe Jason will display there for you. Feel free to read them, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have during the Q&A. So thank you for allowing me to, for giving me the opportunity to share these plays with you to conclude this ongoing conversation. I just want to say that despite all of the uncertainty, the theater artists have a very difficult and important task right now, which is to keep creating and making art. And that during this time where we cannot gather together, that we will find immersive and experimental ways to continue making theater. And we will find ways to make theater even more site-specific now. And so I just want to extend out to the community that when you have the chance to support a theater organization or independent artists, to please consider doing so. We need to support each other now more than ever. So thank you. And thank you, Jason, and thank you everyone for having me here tonight.
Thank you so much, Christin and Danielle. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
So our next presenter is Ryan Mandell. Ryan is the Director of Fabrication Labs in the Eskenazi School of Art, Architecture, and Design, and his areas of specialty are digital fabrication, architecture, furniture design, and product design. So welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Jason. And thank you, Internet, for joining me for this presentation. It's an honor to be presenting with this group of individuals. Tonight, what I'm going to talk to you about primarily is this object, which is a sort of a hybrid of an N95 and a surgical mask. And it is one of a couple objects that I am currently producing with a team on the Indiana University Bloomington campus. I want to mention right away that I'm not working on this project individually, that I'm really a minor player in a larger team. First and foremost, I want to mention Christian McKay, who is my counterpart for the Luddy School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering. He and I have partnered on many projects in the past, and in this case, he's really done the lion's share of the work, and the reason for that, I think, will become clear in just a moment. What I would like to do is start the discussion by talking about how this project has been difficult. And so fundamentally, what I've taken on with this group of individuals is the production of personal protective equipment, or PPE, hopefully to put in the hands of medical professionals and first responders and other individuals who have high traffic professions that are going to be coming into close contact with other people out of necessity. And so the goal is to provide equipment to protect those individuals. This has been a very difficult project to be involved with for multiple reasons, but first and foremost, at the very outset of this project, right at the beginning of spring break, when it became clear that things were changing and there truly was an emergency, I got an email from Provost Revell, kind of a call to arms for all individuals who manage labs on the campus that may be able to produce this equipment. Simultaneously, my wife became very sick. We still don't know for sure whether she had COVID-19 or not, because we were unable to get tested due to the shortage of test kits in the state. But essentially, right when the project kicked off, I was caring for my wife and my two young daughters, my 2-year-old and 5-year-old daughters, because I was without daycare as well. So I really had to take a back seat, and I'm thankful for Christian for really picking up the slack in what is usually a pretty equitable partnership. He's really done a tremendous amount of work to coordinate this effort and really be the boots on the ground, while I did as much as I could at the outset in terms of working remotely, doing design work after the kids fell asleep, and really whatever I could do to help. So what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about this mask, which has been my primary involvement. I've designed the mask that I just showed you. This version of the mask is version 4. I'm going to show you kind of the process of how this mask is constructed, how it came to be, and talk a little bit about the various versions. And then I'm going to finish the presentation by providing a little bit of context in terms of what else is going on in the field. There's a lot, and I'm not sure if it's just because this is what I'm tuned into, but it seems like every day I'm seeing more and more articles about various individuals taking it upon themselves to produce this equipment. So there's a lot going on in the field. What I will now do is, let's see, remember how to share my screen here. Okay. I want to show you, one second, bear with me here. I want to show you the fabrication process, but I first want to talk about some of the stumbling blocks that we've had. Primarily communication has been a problem, obviously because of the inability to meet in person. Lack of coordination has been an issue. There are a lot of disparate efforts going on concurrently with very little coordination among individuals, even despite our best efforts to coordinate. Vetting of designs is a really critical issue. There is a site that I will show you in just a moment where vetted designs are made available to the public for individuals who do want to produce these objects. But those popular vetted designs have led to scarcity of material, which is the next issue that we've come up against. Many of the common materials that are used for PPE production are no longer available because they're being bought up, just like toilet paper is. And also scale and capacity has been an issue. We are relatively well outfitted in our labs, but what we're able to do over the course of a week pales in comparison to what other corporate or industrial entities who are in this field are able to do. And so many times it feels like we're just a very small drop in the bucket, really not aware of what the other drops are doing, but we continue to press forward because what else are you going to do, really? So let me go ahead and share my screen with you, and I will show you a little bit first about the fabrication process that goes into making one of these masks. So primarily the tools that we're using for the production of this equipment are laser engravers and our 3D printers. And the laser engravers are being used to cut this fabric. And this fabric was sourced from IU Health Bloomington, from the hospital. Thankfully, we have made contact with a woman there who's the clinical operations manager, and she's provided us with this material. And it laser cuts pretty well. So we are able to cut patterns for these masks. I'll hold one up again in a minute. And they take about 24 seconds to cut one mask. And we can nest 2 of these masks on 1 sheet of material. The next step is to use a heat sealer. This is primarily just for prototyping purposes. We're using this heat sealer. Long term, I don't believe that this method is going to hold up to the rigors of use, but it's a very easy way to prototype quickly and to be able to tell easily whether a design iteration is going to be successful or not. And then immediately you can go back to the drawing board, redraw something, recut it in 24 seconds, and then heat seal it and see if the change works. So the heat sealer is used to seal the seams on this object. It's folded in specific ways and then sealed. That takes about 2 minutes. And then finally, I incorporated a 3D printed nose clip, which is meant to kind of approximate the flexible metal strip that's found in a lot of N95 respirators. This is 3D printed out of TPU, which is a tetrapolyurethane rubber. So it's a very resilient, springy material that wants to return to its shape if forces cause it to deflect. I'm able to nest 34 of these parts per build. Each build takes about 9 hours. So in theory, you could do 2 builds per 3D printer per day. And my lab alone has 3 machines. So that means we can produce, I forget what the number is exactly. It's on the screen, but I'm actually blocking my own screen with something, so I can't see. And math is not my strong suit, so I apologize. At any rate, we have another lab where my partner Christian is working. He's got many printers that are also able to produce the same number of parts. So we can produce a lot of these masks very, very quickly. However, once we actually go to production, if and when this design is vetted by IU Health Bloomington, we probably will move to sewing the seams instead of heat sealing them. Just because I think it's going to lead to a more robust product that's less prone to failure in the field, which is obviously critical. So I'm going to show you an image of me before a haircut and before, well, I don't look well shaven right now either, but I look a little more scrubby in this picture anyway. This is V1. This is version 1, and you can see that it is not a very elegant design. It does not yet incorporate the nose clip. There are holes cut in the mask to accept the nose clip, but I had not yet created the nose clip. And so this was the first version. It wasn't working great. It doesn't look good. It kind of looks like a feed bag you'd strap onto a horse. So we've come a little ways in terms of refining the design. And so what I want to do now is I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I want to show you, this is the 2-dimensional shape here that's cut on the laser engraver. And so the laser, it's using a laser beam to basically incinerate the material in a very controlled way. If you ignore these holes down here, this is the pattern for version 1, which you just saw me wearing. Version 2, we realized we needed something to apply more pressure around the bridge of the nose. So that was when I designed the 3D printed nose clip, which is this object here. This is a TPU, as I mentioned. It's a really flexible rubber material. It continually springs back to its shape. I designed it with these small little tabs that would interface with the holes that were cut in V2. However, the tabs were not pronounced enough, we found. And also the original version of this is a V2 mask here without a strap. You'll see that the nose clip is on the inside of the mask. And I found very quickly, wearing this just for maybe 5 minutes or so, that this rubber, even though it's a soft rubber, it is tremendously uncomfortable. So I knew that had to change. So then in V3, redesigned so that there's an extra lip of fabric that can be rolled over. And now the rubber nose clip is actually on the exterior of the mask. So you only have cloth contacting your nose. This is a huge improvement. I also incorporated I'll pop this one apart so you can see. I incorporated a different shape of hook. It's a more pronounced hook here. I left the original as the original kind of nubbin. And this worked better, but it became clear that this was superior and should be used in both spots. So version 4, which we're finally on now, is this mask. And it has a much more positive grip, the nose clip does, on this material. and it sits on the outside of the mask. I made this tab a little bit longer so it's easier to fold over and get onto the nose clip. And it ends up being a relatively comfortable mask. There's still room for improvement. I've also shortened the mask a bit so it doesn't protrude so far off the face like that feed bag that version 1 looked like. But you know, it needs a little more work. Just a quick note about this material before I forget to talk about it. This is called halyard, and it is it's a sterile wrap that's used in operating theaters or other clean environments where instruments or tools need to be wrapped in order to be protected from the environment and kept sterile. This material is, if you're familiar with the N95 mask, that's a NIOSH rating, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, I believe is what it is. N95 refers to the percentage of particles of a certain size that the fabric is able to filter out. It filters out 95% of the particles, hence N95. This material is actually an N98 or an N98.5 or something like that. So it's actually more effective than an N95 mask if we are able to get a good fit and we can achieve a comfortable, robust mask that can be worn all day. That being said, the producer, Halyard, has just announced on their website that they're aware that people are making masks out of their material, and that this is not an approved use of the material, and they will not facilitate the sale of the material to that end. So we're kind of stuck in that regard, though we're hoping that our contact at the hospital will be able to continue to source the material so we can produce these. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen again. And I want to talk just a little bit about context. So, there we go, context, okay. So I want to show a couple examples of what's being done at the governmental level, in corporate circles, academic circles, and in professional circles. Governmentally, there has not been a ton of organization, as you probably have gleaned from the news. However, the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health, it does have its nice website that is a kind of repository of approved or vetted designs that can be produced on 3D printers and lasers. And so that's great. But the problem is that this is so highly trafficked that all these designs have been adopted, and the raw materials used for these designs have been snapped up. So supply chain is a significant issue. We're running into that already, being able to source materials that we need to be able to make the equipment. So that means that many times you're forced to start developing unvetted designs because it opens up a pool of materials that's not already completely tapped. So that's a problem. In the corporate sector, some juggernaut entities like Nike and Apple have jumped in and started producing PPE. Mostly you're going to see that they're producing face shields, and that's because there's not such rigorous fit testing. They don't have the same requirements in terms of determining viability. Basically anything that covers the face is seen as an improvement, and so it's not tested as rigorously. So it's an easy thing to get into. Nike has produced these using materials they have on hand for their sportswear collection, and they've distributed these widely to Oregon hospitals since they're headquartered in Oregon. Apple is producing a face shield as well. The last article I read stated that they projected being able to produce 1 million of these per week once they actually hit peak production levels. I don't know where that stands right now, but that makes our efforts seem kind of silly. But nonetheless, we just have to keep moving forward. Academically, there are some universities that have been real leaders in this effort. Cambridge University has a very elegant design for a face mask that's essentially a kind of origami design. It's a single piece of, it's like a PETG or a polypropylene film that's folded in very specific ways in order to create a rigid visor. A nice simple design. MIT is using a CNC die cutting machine to cut a thin film. This is PETG film. We were trying to source this for a set of face shields that we wanted to produce, and we kept finding that we couldn't get it. It was out of stock, and then I came across this article stating that MIT has partnered with the company that produces that material, and they are producing up to 100,000 of these a week for Boston area hospitals, which is why we can't get the material. It's an interesting design, maybe a bit overly complex, but basically it makes a rigid 3D face shield entirely out of a single sheet of material that's folded and tabbed in specific ways. Columbia University also has a nice, simple, elegant design. This requires 3D printing, and we are actually producing these as well. Primarily Christian, my collaborator, is the lead on that project. We've produced, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 of these already. They use a thin sheet of material. We've had to use acrylic because the PETG was all bought up by MIT. And then we're 3D printing on our FDM 3D printers. I don't know how quickly we produced the 500, but it was about a week or two. I think we produced 500 of them. And so finally, what I want to talk about is in the professional sphere, I want to show you some examples from professional artists, architects, and designers. And the thread that I've picked up on in looking at and researching the topic is a desire for normalcy or maintaining the status quo. And I think that this situation we find ourselves in is a really interesting time to start to question the status quo, how we want to live moving forward. And so I think it's interesting that most of the designs that I'm seeing a lot of publicity for are designs that attempt to keep things the way that they were, to keep things moving the way that they were. This first example is by an artist named Danielle Baskin. This is a facial recognition N95 mask. She's started a company where you can take a picture of your face, send it in to her company, and they will print it at high definition on an N95 mask. The idea being that now you can still continue to use the facial recognition feature on your phone while being safe. And so, no pun intended, but on the face of it, this seems to me like really just a way to facilitate the dependency that we have on our devices. I think this work becomes a little bit more interesting if you know about other work that Danielle Baskin has done. She is really a fan of the absurd, and some of her other work includes holding funerals for expired domain names on the internet. She also has another website that allows you to determine whether or not you should get married to a given person, depending on whether the domain name of your both names together is available or not. And she also has a website called Decruiter, which is like recruiting, but for people who want to leave their jobs. It's a kind of online tool that helps you gauge whether or not you should leave your job. So taking those things into account, this project becomes a little more interesting. But I think at first glance, and people who are unaware of her body of work, it's certainly going to seem like really this is just about allowing you to continue to use your iPhone unhindered. Joe Doucet is a product designer and a self-proclaimed entrepreneur, critically acclaimed as well. And he has designed this face shield that, these are all renders, and these are not real. He's made a joke about not being able to do photo shoots these days, so these are all actually renders. But this concept design is for a face shield that he hoped would be widely adopted because it's more, it's less clunky, it's more chic, it's stylish. And what he hopes for is that people will use the equipment if it's desirable to do so. So making something that is mandatory and undesirable desirable. However, in my mind, this seems like an attempt to maintain vanity, an attempt to turn personal protective equipment into a luxury item. So it seems a bit suspect in my mind. PPO Interiors is an Italian company that does aerospace interiors, and so they've come up with a couple interesting designs for facilitating the continuation of air travel, if there are any airlines left after all of this kind of wraps up a little bit. But I thought that this was actually a kind of interesting idea. I believe they called this design the yin and yang design. So basically it uses a kind of acrylic enclosure and then flips the middle seat facing the other direction in order to provide more distance between passengers. And this one I think is the most questionable. This is by a creative agency called Production Club. Primarily, Production Club does design for immersive environments and events for the music industry. This is a design for a suit called the Microshell. And the intent of this suit is to allow individuals to continue clubbing and partying. It is a kind of enclosure for the top half of the body, and it incorporates these canisters, which are drink and vape canisters. It also has built-in speakers with various opportunities to mix the audio to your liking, direct stream to what the DJ is playing with different effects added. And I'll also point out too in the left image here that it is just specifically for the top half of the body, and the stated intent here was that they wanted to make it easy for the individual to use the restroom or potentially to have sexual intercourse while wearing the suit. So very clearly this, and it interfaces with your phone. You can see it adds your phone as a kind of gauntlet, so you can be on your phone while you're in the club, which is important. Clearly this is meant to just facilitate the kind of decadent lifestyle that many people were used to before the pandemic. So, the designers make the claim that this is about allowing people to continue to be happy, and that a society can't grow unless individuals are able to achieve happiness. And so there's, maybe some merit to that claim, but it's debatable. Finally, I wanted to show you this design by Foster & Partners, which is a international, highly acclaimed architecture firm. And this design to me was really relieving in that it's not fussy. It doesn't have an agenda. It really is just, other than being protective equipment, it just serves its function. It's very pared down. It's very simple. It's not been monetized. There's no attempt to capitalize on the need for PPE here. These files are provided to the public entirely free through their website. So I thought that this was really refreshing, and really, this is what I hope for the project that I'm working on, is that we can come up with something that really solves an urgent need without ego or vanity or luxury or commodity or monetization coming into play. And that's my best hope for this project. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to the Q&A.
Thanks so much, Ryan. That was really fascinating.
Thank you.
Our final speakers tonight are Sarah Knott and Carrie Schwier. Sarah Knott is professor of history at IUB and a research fellow at the Kinsey Institute. She's a historian of events such as the American Revolution and of ordinary experiences such as maternity, as well as a scholar of life writing. And her most recent book, Mother is a Verb and an Unconventional History, came out last year. It was described by the New York Times as a joy to read, and I encourage all of you to go online and order a copy from your local bookstore as soon as possible. And Carrie Schwier is the Outreach and Public Services Archivist for IU Libraries, University Archives, where she oversees the department's public services and outreach initiatives such as exhibits and social media. She also works with faculty to integrate the archive's rich collection of primary source and materials into course assignments, enabling IU students to literally touch history as part of their learning experiences. Carrie presents and writes on primary source literacy, library and archives, outreach initiatives, and university history, and she is active professionally in the Midwest Archives Conference and Society of American Archivists. And before I hand this over to Carrie and Sarah, I want to remind all of you to post your questions on the Facebook feed as soon as possible, because as soon as they are done their presentation, we're all going to join each other as a group and answer your questions.
Great, thank you, Jason, and hello, Carrie. It's nice to see you.
Hi, Sarah.
Wow, such a range of corners of creativity across our campus, and I think we will add to that sense of far-flung modes of creativity. So hello, everyone. I'm here this evening to share with you the story of my collaboration with IU archivist Carrie Schwier.
And thanks, Sarah. And I'm here to talk to you and share the story of my collaboration with Sarah Knott. We want to tell you a little bit more about our coronavirus Archive Your Story project, and to share with you what we've set in motion back on March 19th, and perhaps also to invite some of you who are listening to participate yourself.
That's right. So like Christin, way back at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a moment of creativity and making, if you like, right? It was very clear to us at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think many of us as an archivist and as a historian, that these kinds of events needed recording. And that perhaps as well, that these kinds of events, that the recording of these kinds of events was a form of support and creativity in of itself. So back then on March 18th, March 19th, we circulated a call among faculty and students and staff of Indiana University Bloomington to keep diaries of their everyday experience, right? We were interested in the texture of their ordinary lives. We asked them to document their thoughts and feelings, what they noticed as things changed from day to day and from week to week. And I guess at that point we wouldn't have said from month to month, but here we are in our months to months.
Okay, so tonight we'd like to say a few more words about why we want people to keep diaries, especially during big historic events like this crisis. It's very important for both the present day and for the future. Mm-hmm. So we'd like you to think of this as a creative response to the process in the here and now, as well as a service to the university as an institution and how it can perform a service for the future.
Yeah.
So we've decided tonight to kind of approach this as a conversational format between Sarah and I, if you haven't noticed. Sarah, can you share a bit more with us from the historian's perspective about the importance of this project?
Absolutely, and I'm in fact going to ask you to pull up that wonderful slide from Martha Ballard's 18th century diary to kick us off, and also in response to Jason's request that we start with objects. So here it comes, and if we turn to the second slide, Carrie, that will be just perfect.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so on your screens is a single page, in fact, from a diary from the late 18th century. So let us take ourselves back to Hallowell in Maine in the late 18th century, right? So a place that's a seaport about 8 months of the year. It's about 46 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. The kind of place, I mean, it's the kind of a community where people remember the closing and shutting of the river, right? It's a secluded community. And this is the diary of a midwife who lived in that community. She was born in 1735. And once her children were grown, she began to keep a daily diary that documented ordinary life. We might, I think, best call it as a kind of stock taking, really. Ballard was a midwife, and with her children grown, she was able to expand her midwifery practice. So if you look at the snapshot of just a single page in front of you, you can see that she took a particular page, she ruled out that page, right? She created columns. So from left to right, she recorded the month and the day of the week, and then a large section in the middle where she reported on the everyday, and then the column, which I think, at least for me, is obscured by our images, she added details about the birds that she attended and payment for those birds. That middle section started out just 19 items for each page, so she was really just keeping quick notes for herself, but it expanded in the course of keeping the diary. And so here she is writing, clear to write, so documenting, as many diarists did in the 18th century, what kind of weather it was. So I did housework near night and worked in my garden. Sally and I made some pies. So she was living still with her grown daughters. I was seized with a severe pain in my back, which lasted an hour, and I seemed free for them. Mr. Buzzle called me to go and see his sister Judy, who was in labour. At that moment of her occupation surfacing. I arrived at his house about dusk. I felt the colic before I reached there and was severely exercised with it through the night. So here we have some of what I think historians love best about diaries, which is that they pull us retrospectively into lost everyday, right? And the reason that I wanted to use Martha Ballard's diary in particular as our object this evening is that one of the events that Ballard documents in this diary is in fact a local scarlet fever epidemic. Martha didn't call it scarlet fever, she called it canker rash. It was serious. It had a death rate not unlike that of the coronavirus, in fact, or at least a death rate, a general death rate that was something like the initial death rate of older people in China, right? Thinking about all those shifting statistics that we now live among. And what's wonderful about the diary is that what emerges is the texture of everyday experience of that pandemic, that epidemic in Hallowell. So Martha describes, for example, all the different caregivers that took care of the sick. I was thinking of Ryan's description of navigating caring for his wife and caring for his small children. Well, here in Ballard's diary, we have someone documenting the caregiving in her own community, right? By midwives, by nurses, by those she calls after nurses, by wives, by daughters, by sisters, by aunts, and also by those that she called watchers, who were people who would sit with an ill person all night. And so what's remarkable about the diary, and what I hope is maybe remarkable about some of the diaries that get kept across the state and in Bloomington during this current coronavirus epidemic, what's remarkable about it is that it allows us retrospectively into otherwise lost every day. And it does so in ways that are often quite unexpected. We can sense from Martha, for example, the way in which people talked about illness, as someone would move from being poorly or low to being very ill, to being very ill indeed, perhaps to be seemingly expiring, and also moved out of illness, right? That someone was very better or entirely mended. So Ballard's diary is wonderful for us, and actually, Carrie, I think we're good with that now, thank you. Ballard's diary is wonderful for us in the here and now, because it helps us retrieve lost worlds. And when we first thought about these moments this spring, and now this spring and summer and fall, as a historical event, both Carrie and I shared an immediate sense that if an important event, how crucial that it be well recorded, and that what got recorded would not just be the details of a stay-at-home order or all of the media commentary in which we are all saturated, but also just the details of everyday life, right? How, in fact, this pandemic intersected with the most intimate of experiences. So with Ballard, for example, there's a moment where she juxtaposes an unexpected hailstorm with, you know, the illness of a child. I'm thinking in my own diary of the ways in which the weather impedes and shapes my mood, or the fact of some hot air balloons that flew across our back garden a couple of days ago and completely shifted the experience of the day, with people rushing out into the street and following them up the road. It's those kinds of details that were so important in the lived experience that we lose if we don't have diaries. So that's a commentary about historians and diaries. And now actually I'm going to turn to Carrie and to ask her to tell us more about what are the IU archives, and to think a little bit about some of their content.
Awesome, thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to shift back to share screen because I've got a couple of slides to share. Awesome. So for those of you who aren't familiar with IU archives, I generally note that we collect in three main areas. We document the administrative functions of IU, so including the Board of Trustees, the President's Office, academic departments, etc. The oldest portions of our collection date to the 1820s from the tenure of IU President Andrew Wiley. And today we receive regular accruals from all across the university as part of our records management program. Secondly, we also document the research and teaching functions of our faculty and alumni. So this can cover about any discipline that you can think of, because our faculty historically have been so incredibly diverse. So we have the papers of folklorists, we have the papers of artists, and we have the papers of scientists, and everyone kind of sprinkled in between. And then thirdly, we'd also document the lived experience of those people who are associated with IU. So these can be faculty, staff, students, and alumni. And I'll freely admit that this is my favorite part of our collection for some of the reasons that Sarah kind of just described when she was talking about Martha Ballard's diary. Just to offer a few examples from our collection, we have the diaries of Theophilus Wiley. He was a professor and cousin to Andrew Wiley. These diaries span from 1830 to 1892, and they cover topics such as local outbreaks of cholera and typhoid, the Civil War, the observations of an amateur astronomer, and others very simple, kind of almost, they feel to us everyday breakthroughs in Bloomington, such as the first street lights coming to town. We have artifacts in our collection, such as the butternut badges, which are here in a slide, kind of in the bottom middle. These were worn by Southern sympathizing students during the Civil War. We have the meeting minutes of student groups, such as the Student Religious Cabinet, who were active in civil rights issues and supporting refugee students during the 1930s and 40s. Our collection also includes troves of correspondence from students to their families, ranging on topics such as the quality of boarding house food, to first dates and homesickness, not so unfamiliar to the conversations I had with my own mom when I was away at college in the 2000s. And then we also have the letters and diaries of numerous soldiers who were fighting in the Civil War and both world wars. Probably the diary that is most relevant for our conversation here tonight is a set of an 11-volume set of diaries that we have from William Ringer, who was a student at IU from 1916 to 1920. Ringer was born in 1898 in Williamsport, Indiana, and graduated in 1920 magna cum laude with a BA in philosophy. He wrote frequently and at length about his campus activities, his fellow students and professors. His sophomore year, he joined the Student Army Training Corps, and he wrote extensively about the quote-unquote barracks that he lived in, which were actually converted fraternity housing on campus. He wrote about their training and also about the 1918 flu outbreak that occurred in, around the world, and the resulting quarantine of the men on the campus community at that time. Ringer himself contracted the flu, but thankfully he did recover, unlike a number of his fellow classmates who were on campus at the time. So with all of these examples, I often say that these are the kinds of materials that almost give the color to the rest of our collection. So sort of those administrative records that we have, these kind of give them researchers a sense of what it actually felt like to be in that experience. So in addition to preserving and providing access to these materials at the archives, our second mission is to support the research and teaching mission of the university. So we work extensively with researchers ranging from undergraduates to seasoned scholars such as Sarah, and researchers who are here on campus as well as from around the world. We also have an active instruction program, which I manage, that focuses on utilizing primary sources in the classroom. And so the University Archives in that capacity now works with approximately 30 different departments using primary sources in a whole dynamic range of ways. Great.
That's perfect. And I mean, I should say that you can begin to see now where the collaboration between Carrie and I came from. We actually knew each other well before this pandemic began. We were brought together through the Primary Source Immersion Program sponsored by the IU Libraries. And I've now brought many of my classes into the IU Archives, most recently, of course, on the history of gender and sexuality, for example. So when the pandemic began, I immediately thought of those remarkable student diaries sitting in the IU Archives. And it seemed to me incredibly important that our institutions step forward and give people the opportunity, a creative opportunity, a stock-taking opportunity to keep diaries and to have them deposited for longevity in the IU archives, to join the collection, in other words, that Carrie has just outlined for us. So Carrie, can you say a little bit more about logistics of what we've been asking people to do?
Awesome. So to get started, we are asking people to fill out a really simple Google form to express their interest in participation. And I'll just add that to this date, I checked this morning, Sarah, and we have about 200 people who've expressed interest, or at least said that they are participating at this point. Yeah. And then after they fill out that form, they receive sort of a list of FAQs and a link to a submission form for whenever they're ready to, submit their stuff. We've received a lot of questions from people about what we want them to document, which I initially found incredibly interesting because as archivists and historians, this felt so obvious to Sarah, but I think it's something we need to be a little more explicit about. And what people are documenting is going to be unique to each person. So all of our lives have been reshaped by this moment, and historians of the future are going to want to know how that looked and felt. Maybe some of you who are listening are now working from home, juggling kids. Myself, I'm at home juggling a 5-month-old puppy who wants to chew on my, headset all the time. Maybe you're one of those heroic essential employees who's kind of holding everything together right now. Or maybe you're now unexpectedly unemployed. What are the things that you're anxious or frustrated right now? We want to hear about those in your diaries. What are the things you're thankful for? What are you noticing about everyday changes in the world around you? We think it's important that you remember that what you might feel really mundane to you right now is actually exactly what people are going to want to know about in the future. One other thing I want to bring up that has come up as a result of this, since COVID-19 is a public health crisis, it's also likely that submissions might include personal health information of the participant and others, which is information that is protected by federal law. So we are getting questions about, like, what are the kinds of things I shouldn't include in my submission? So as part of kind of the lead up to unrolling this project, we worked extensively with my super talented colleague Naz Pantaloni in the IU libraries. He's the head of our library copyright program. He provided extensive feedback to make sure that we got the legal guidance out there about these issues. So we got them right, so this collection is legally accessible for researchers in the future. I also want to give a shout out to the archivists at UNC Charlotte, who had already started a similar project and provided feedback for some of our documentation. So going back, so at the time of submission, you will be asked to agree to a personal health information agreement. And it's important to note that the participant must agree to not include personally identifiable information about another person aside for themselves. If the individual chooses to do so, we have kind of some options that are available to them upon the time of submission. Another option we wanted to give people, because we know some participants might have concerns about privacy, either because of their health information being out there or because, frankly, they might have critical things to say about this present moment. I know I certainly do. In order to alleviate some of those desires, potentially for self-censorship, we chose to allow the possibility for anonymous submissions, or the option to restrict submissions for up to 5 years. All of that is intended to protect participants and hopefully encourage them to record a more open record of the events as they see them right now. So when people are ready, they can submit things via email by emailing the archives, or if they're keeping physical diaries, once hopefully we reopen, they'll be able to send those in to us via mail. So Sarah, I have a question for you.
Okay, go right ahead.
I know we've talked a lot about making sure we reach a diverse sample of our community with this project. Can you tell me a little bit more about where you've shared the call for participation, and if you've heard anything from those participants?
So that's really helpful, and I think I'm watching the time, Carrie, and I'm going to use this to sort of wrap up where we're at in order to turn to the Q&A. So I have to say we had a wonderful initial response that led the IDS to our door, and they amplified our call, as did the local Herald Times. So we had really wonderful reporters who saw both the creativity and curiosity in this project and also its long-term importance. We've also used our own contacts across town, for example, a local family shelter where we've been able to provide hard copies of notebooks. But I think I'm going to give the last word actually to a colleague, because many colleagues across the university have taken up the project and reworked it in some way for their classes. Those colleagues weren't able to incentivize students and require them to submit to us, but I hope the students will choose to do so anyway. And so I'm going to just read some lines from my wonderful colleague in the history department, Lara Kriegel, whose class Introduction to Prose in the English department took up this challenge. And I think, Carrie, you haven't heard these words, but I think you'll see the ways in which they wrap up a lot of what you and I wanted to say this evening, as well as the potential in the project. So Lara reports, many students said this was their first diary experience, and they put a lot into it in terms of thought and emotion. The exercise, she says, was a perfect bridge between a professor and students dispersed. She got to know the students in ways she never could have done in the classroom, the diaries allowing her privileged access to their lives, privileged glimpses, into their lives. I got a sense of home life, Lara writes, in apartments in Bloomington with families in Indiana, the United States, and abroad. This was a class that had a notable racial, ethnic, and geographical diversity. I was able to see the ways that freshmen and seniors were meeting the end of a very unexpected academic year. At times, I felt I had a seat at a family's table or in a student's kitchen as they made meals, baked goods, and ordered takeout. This is exactly the texture of everyday life, right? I was taken on trips to the grocery store, and I was privileged to get the perspective of student workers too. The students brought to this task at a challenging time a wonderful mixture of honesty, humor, and humanity. Our university's archival record will be the richer for this project and their participation in it. So I hope that rings pleasantly for you, Carrie, and I'm glad to hand the baton back to Jason to bring us all back together.
Laura is so wonderful.
All right, I think we're all going to coming back, be joining the group. Carrie, I think if you turn off your screen, we can see everybody up. Perfect. Thank you. That was great. Sarah, Carrie, I usually travel this time of year. Sarah, I think you do too, right? We both head to Europe, and I'm not going this year, obviously, and so I'm doing more gardening than usual. And so one of the things I'm doing while I'm gardening is listening to audiobooks, and I'm listening to Dorothy Wordsworth's Grassmere journals right now. And so your diary project is making me think about the ways that we live our everyday experiences through our words. And in fact, all of our projects that we were talking about today are in some way reshaping other individuals' everyday experiences. But often as researchers and creators, we don't get asked about how the experience of changing other people's everydays is changing our everydays. Oh. And so I just wanted to throw out to all of you as a first question, how is your work in transforming other people's everydays transforming your everydays?
Gosh, well, I'll give an anecdotal response to that, Jason, which is that I'm fortunate to have neighbors who are very connected with one another. And so one of the ways in which this throwing of creativity out there has redounded on me unexpectedly is that the diary keeping has become part of the texture of our conversations. And one of my neighbors up the road observed that actually she was having a hard time keeping the diary up, and she hadn't written it for a few days. And I got to say to her, you know, that's exactly the texture of the thing that we capture, right? Is that many people, I suspect, and certainly the media commentary suggests, that in the last week or so, people have arrived at a moment where the first wave of the crisis has passed, but actually we're absolutely still in the thing. And so for a diary to taper off and then to be picked up again exactly reflects that, right? I mean, the silences here are as important as the words. So that's one way in which it's redounded, that the creativity thrown out has redounded back on me in ways I've really enjoyed. It shifted the texture of my relations with my neighbors.
I'll say relatedly, just for the diary project, for me, it's really brought me closer to colleagues within the archival community that I didn't know as a result of getting this project up and running. Just, you know, people, I initially reached out to some people to kind of share their documentation. As a result, you know, after our project got going, I've talked to at least a dozen different archivists from around the country that I had never interacted with before. I've probably crossed paths with them at one of our giant professional conferences, but it's been really invigorating in that way.
Ryan and Christin, I don't know, or Danielle, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I've been thinking quite a bit about the speed of our lives, and that has become abundantly clear to me because I've been pulled from the normal speed most of the time, and now in a position where I'm primarily caring for my daughters, and so I'm spending hours upon hours pushing them on the swings in our backyard, and time in a really delightful way feels like molasses. And then I go into the lab to work on these masks, and I'm able to iterate using this technology that we have. You know, I'm talking to someone on Zoom, how does this look? Or I'm talking to them on a Slack channel. This is what I'm working on. What are you working on? I'm iterating on the laser. You know, I'm cutting multiple variations of something within a minute. And the extremity of that, I think, is really brought to light because of the new contrast of having to slow down. It just really revealed to me the speed that we're moving at most of the time without being at all aware of it.
So Jason, like me, is a historian of the 18th century, and he will know from that that one of the things that we know about events is that they warp time, and that description you gave is so perfect in terms of the way in which time has been pushed and pulled at in a variety of ways for you in comparison to your normal everyday. So that was so beautifully put, and it sounds so similar to, say, the diaries we might read of the French Revolution. We get a similar sense of the disorientation that comes with time itself changing. I don't know if that sounds familiar to you, Jason, but that's what I heard when I heard Ryan speak there.
For sure. I was thinking the same thing, the French Revolution. That's great.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you, Christin.
Okay. Yep. I just want to definitely agree with Sarah on the feeling of being disoriented, and I feel like personally for me it has taken like the time to be creative. It's like there's this big push on like everyone needs to be creative right now. We have all the time, but the time actually feels like it's dragging, and it's hard to be creative at this time. I've been struggling with creativity, even though creativity was the first response that I had to this pandemic. But yeah, I definitely agree with time feeling like it's warped, and it has affected my feelings of creativity. I feel more introspective. I feel like I just want to reflect more, and so this diary, idea is perfect right now, I think, and I think that would open the channels to my creativity right now, and so I really, really appreciate that reminder, that is so important to keep a diary, keep a journal.
Yeah, Kristen, to follow up on your comment, we have a question from the audience. Plays, masks, and narrative. It's fascinating to see the arts providing equipment for living, so to speak. What distinguishes creative activity in times of crisis from times of calm, if anything?
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to times of crisis, creativity is it's important because it's the way in which we try to find the answers to all the questions that are that have uncertain answers, right? So it's like during a time where we don't have the answers, where we don't know how to react, creativity allows us to find those ways, to find those answers, in a way where there's not so much restriction, where there's not so much limitation, where there's not so much about, where there isn't these ideas of like, oh, that's impossible, because with creativity you can, especially when it comes to writing plays or anything or any creative writing, you can find, and nothing is everything goes and anything goes, you know? And so when you have that mindset of how anything can go during a crisis, and this is a long-winded answer, I'm sorry, but during a crisis, you can think of things outside the box. And I think that helps with crisis times. Whereas when we're not in a crisis, there is so much more flexibility, and I feel like creating comes out of a not so much of a need, but more from a desire. And so right now, people who are creating, most of us feel like there's a need to create. There's a need to find answers that we are not being provided with.
It strikes me as I'm listening to you, Kristen, then, that actually creativity doesn't flow from crisis. Creativity actually is fundamental and constitutive of crisis, right? And you might even say it's one of the foundational qualities of crisis. This is how we know we're in a crisis, is that new forms of creativity are required of us. I mean, required of us in the here and now, how we move ourselves through our days, right? And then required perhaps in more optimistic ways in terms of unexpected collaborations and connections between different parts of our lives where new creativities bubble up. I mean, I'll say for myself that the creative impulse to reach Carrie, who's someone I already trusted and admired, and make the coronavirus archive project happen, actually came from watching the children's illustrator Mo Willems address New York children for the first 2 weeks of the crisis, and do it with total humanity and beauty in the here and now. And it was such a tonic. And for me, the question was, what is the tonic with my expertise and my skills? What's the tonic that I can produce inside myself and for others that would be like what Mo Willems did, you know, Monday to Friday, 1 p.m. for many young children and their families in those early weeks. You know, it was really transformative for me.
I think one odd thing that I found about this experience is it kind of relates to that time warp we were just talking about a little bit ago. And I've talked about this with other friends. It feels like in a certain odd sense, you know, like we said, time has kind of slowed, but in a way it's like that slowed time has opened up space, like headspace, to be a little more creative with projects we hadn't had the like headspace to think about before. Those of us, especially for those of us, I'm not in a very creative field at all. I mean, what we do is pretty prescriptive, you know, and, you know, our days are pretty set, and, you know, we have our projects that we're chugging away on. But it seems like this time has opened up a little more, I don't know, a little more room for it somehow.
You know, picking up on this warped time concept, what also strikes me about all of your work is that to some extent, the material world in which you work has also been warped and is now so much more mediated to some, maybe Ryan less so, but in a different way, our worlds are being mediated by the digital. And so what is the material culture of this moment is transforming? And so I just was wondering if you might reflect a little bit on how your material worlds have transformed, and how that may have also transformed what you are creating and doing at this moment.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think what I've noticed is that the physical world has intruded upon the digital in a new way. And by that, I mean the precautions that are necessary in order to go into a university building, in order to operate the equipment. We've taken precautions such that there's only ever one person in the lab at a time, and that individual is always wearing gloves and a mask, and then that person wipes down every surface that they've touched with an antiseptic wipe as they leave. And so having to take those additional steps and being constantly aware of your body and space and trying to track, oh, did I touch that or not? It's a new kind of awareness of being that was not present at all. You know, in the past, I could move seamlessly in that space and very quickly and very efficiently. And so the physical has intruded on that process in a new and kind of frustrating way.
Theater is meant to be a personal experience, like person to person. So this medium has been, this virtual digital medium has been a strain for the theater community, I think. But it's also been fun because we've been exploring different ways that we can produce live theater, and we've been thinking about different ways that we can make theater more accessible. And so I feel like this medium has definitely helped. It's helping theater evolve, but all in all, theater is meant to be shared. It's meant to be a shared live experience. So it's been interesting seeing the difference in the, you know, with everything being online. But I feel like it's also been amazing because usually when now if you do a Zoom reading, you can invite somebody from the West Coast, which you weren't able to do before, you know. And so theater, this creative endeavor that is meant to be a community is actually becoming more of a community with Zoom and with, you know, Facebook Live and all these different digital and virtual meetings. So it's interesting to see it all unfold, really. And I'm wondering how much we will keep from this experience as we move on.
Hey, I'd love to chime in with what Christin was talking about as an actor. Really trying to do any type of performance via Zoom has been really difficult at times, and also, like Christin was saying, I found some new things in my performance because of this experience. I think a lot of times we don't look at each other eye to eye, not like we're not actually looking at each other, we're looking past each other. But with these Zoom calls, it's sort of given us a new perspective when we are interacting face to face, because you're seeing the other person's face right on a big screen. So you're sort of forced to pay more attention to what they're saying, how they're saying it, and react in kind. So I think we're learning a lot about how to perform in a stronger manner than we might have been performing before. So yeah, I think that this is hard for some aspects of it, but I think we're going to grow a lot because of it. So
Carrie and Sarah, I want to give you time to answer that question, but I'm going to piggyback another question on it that relates to it. And the question was about social media as a historical document and the challenges of recording these types of, for lack of a better way of phrasing them, ephemeral digital media and keeping them as part of the historical record.
Carrie, I think that's your bailiwick.
Yeah, I can take that one. So we've actually had a couple of people who are involved in this project who've wanted us to capture their Twitter feeds. So we're, I don't know if any of the other presenters here are familiar with Archive It. It's Jason. So we already were set up using Archive It at the university archives, capturing university websites, university social media accounts, that kind of thing. So we're essentially shifting over. These will be the first couple of probably personal Twitter accounts that we've ever done. But then there's also lots of other, so the electronic record section of the Society of American Archivists, there's been a whole group of people that have kind of come together that are capturing all of the kind of important websites and social media accounts that have kind of popped up during this time as well. I will totally admit that is not my general area of expertise. We have an awesome digital archivist at the University Archives, Mary Mellon, who's I'm essentially funneling those questions to her, and she's going to figure out all the tech behind it. So it takes a little bit of a team.
Well, fantastic. I have I actually have 4 questions for you, but it's one question really for all of you. So I'm actually going to ask. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and then you can choose which one of the 3 questions you want to answer, and we'll use that as a way to bring our time together to an end. So, in addition to all of the folks that are watching us tonight, hundreds more will watch us as this streams over the course of the next weeks and months. So, who then would you suggest? Who should they read? Who should they watch? Or who should they follow? Who would you have them read, watch, or follow?
Oh, okay. I have a really good one as a historian. I was having a hard time for a moment because I've not wanted to read or watch or follow anything that wasn't about the here and now. I was so offended by the world that we've left behind and missed it. There is a really outstanding political historian called Heather Cox Richardson, who writes a daily letter for an American. So there's someone who is profoundly trained in political history, deeply knows US history from the 20th century, who is reading the news on our behalf and digesting and reflecting on it in terms of cutting out the noise and figuring out what the storylines are. And so I found her an absolute breath of fresh air as I worked my way through my own, social media and different media, mainstream media. So Heather Cox Richardson, prize-winning, marvelous American historian, letter from an American.
I'll go next. I am following a couple people on Instagram that I think have been, it's been enlightening in that, if you can't tell, this is lumber drying on a rack behind me. I'm a woodworking enthusiast. And so a lot of the people that I follow on Instagram are craftspeople, carpenters or builders. And so I've watched these individuals who are, they're very high-end blue-collar workers, essentially, who need to be able to go to work every day and rely on that for their living. And it reminds me every day, seeing the hardships that they're starting to face, just how fortunate we are to be in the position that we are at Indiana University, to continue to draw a paycheck and to be able to work remotely doing the work that we do. It's humbling to witness that.
I won't offer a specific one, but just kind of a general suggestion. So I've found myself wanting to go back to read some of my comfort reads, kind of from my childhood, kind of adolescent times. So I've been, I've talked to a couple friends about this. I'm really wanting to go back and read Little Women, and Anne of Green Gables. Some of those things that I haven't read since I was probably 15 years old. So that's kind of where my brain has been going recently, and trying to not continuously consume the news 24/7.
I want to piggyback off of that because I feel like that was a great suggestion to sort of just to revisit things, and this may sound a little bizarre, but I feel like Beckett is a great playwright to reread right now because he, for some reason, and I have reread like some of his plays recently, but for some reason his plays are very like they just have this air of pandemic play, especially Waiting for Godot. So I would definitely revisit Beckett right now as a playwright.
I would just like to ask if people have the time to go onto BroadwayWorld.com. A lot of musical theater majors who were supposed to graduate this year have posted videos of their showcase songs. And so this is a chance to just see, support, and appreciate that there are people out there who are, even though it's hard to create during this time, we're still putting ourselves out there. We're still trying our best to just make the best of this moment. Our graduation is a little wonky right now, but still being able to celebrate, I think, is something that we should try to do at this time.
Definitely.
Well, thank you, everybody. This has been really fascinating and inspiring. I just want to thank everybody for joining us here tonight and leave you with a few websites and events, upcoming events to make sure you see. Again, I want to remind everybody to sign up for the IUPUI Arts and Humanities Institute Art and Ethics seminars. You can find out more information about IAHI at IAHI Indy, Indy with a Y. The second thing is the Arts and Humanities Council. Check out their Facebook page. On Thursdays at 6 p.m. Each week, they have their Thursdays at Home series, which is an arts and humanities variety show which features performances and readings from IU faculty, students, and friends. And this week's program includes novelist Samrat Upadhyay, the graphic designer Sarah Edmonds-Martin, student songwriter Sarah Cassidy, and dancers from the Jacobs School of Music Ballet Department. And of course, you can check out the virtual Arts and Humanities page on the Arts and Humanities Council website. And you can find that very easily just by searching the internet, or since you're already watching us on Facebook, the information's right there on the Facebook page where you are. So it shouldn't be too hard to find us. Next week, please join us once again, 8 p.m. For Quarantine Conversations. We look forward to seeing you, and have a great evening.